waking up.
I know. Oh, we're all just waking
My
up.
son's
Oh,
going to bring me a cup
oh,
of tea in a minute. So,
oh, that's good. We'll, we'll
yeah.
we'll have to say hi to him too, whichever one it is. But
Yeah, because
hello
we're all
to you, friends
homeschooling.
out. What? Sorry, what?
Oh, it's okay. Carry on.
Okay, we're going to carry on. Hello. I'm going to officially welcome us now. This is an interview series called In Response, Interviews with Intriguing Internalizers. And my name is Mia Park. So I started this interview series at the beginning of May 2020. We're in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic. And I saw this as a great opportunity to connect with people, my friends and my family all over the world, who I think are really interesting and have really interesting things to say because of the way they tick on the inside. They're intriguing internalizers. So right now we are very excited to zoom over to Australia. I'm in Chicago and you're in Australia right now. And welcome to Randall Lee. Hello.
Morning, Mia. It's morning over here, and it's Friday. Oh, there's my microphone on that side. I'm looking at myself and I'm reversed, so it's kind of a bit weird.
That I know it is weird. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all getting used to all the different online platforms, and I haven't used this one, but yeah. Yeah, it's morning here. It's Friday. We're doing homeschooling at the moment. I've got two kids in the other room, promising they're going to be a bit quiet, but they'll probably completely bomb this room at some point
Good.
with their presence, and that's fine. Um,
And that's
yeah,
fine. Yeah.
we had a paper plane challenge this morning. That was a lot of fun until the paper plane got destroyed. And anyway, that was maths. Was building a paper
There was
plane.
Matt.
Mm.
Right. And speaking of wearing many hats as a father and now jumping on, so I'll get a little introduction with Randall. He's a multi-dimensional person, like a lot of these people in this interview series. He is a scientist as an oceanographer in
Mhm.
Australia or the sea in the oceans around Australia. But also, he is a musician. So I know Randall. We met in the 1990s in
Yeah.
Chicago
Hmm.
because Randall was in the music scene. You know, Chicago had a thriving indie rock music scene, and Randall's bands, the main one, Ashtray Boy, was really one of the main like fibers in the rich tapestry of Chicago's indie music scene at the time. And then he moved back to Australia and is living there now and comes back to the States every 2 years. And last time you guys were here, I was lucky enough to play drums with you. We had played a couple
Yeah.
gigs. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I guess
Is
I met
there,
you, Mia, because you played in a band called Kim. You were part of that fabric too, and you were in this
yeah.
amazing three-piece band called Kim that just exploded on stage every time you played. That I saw anyway. Maybe you did some jazz gigs somewhere. I didn't see those ones, but yeah.
That was fun. It was fun. And we're still doing our thing. It just happens to be in different forms now. Is there
Mm.
anything else that you want people to know about you?
No, they'll find out, you know, as we chat. Things will,
Yeah.
but yeah,
So,
I'm an oceanographer by day, musician by day and night, or whenever, or all the time, I guess.
and
Um,
father all the time, and also husband to Carla, of course,
yeah,
from
yeah,
who we also knew from Chicago. So shout out to
Chicago.
Carla.
Yeah,
Uh, and who is the bass player in the current Ashtray Boy? There's been a lot of
yeah,
rotating musicians in Ashtray Boy. I love bands like
yeah. We're more of a movement.
that. Move it, Ashtray Boy.
Mm.
So I like to ask people in this interview series first to share what's going on in your outside world. So immediately
Mm.
in Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah, look, I just said, like, it's really been quite recent in Australia that we've just started having restrictions released, and to some extent, our numbers have dropped down dramatically. We're at, maybe 10 cases a day across the country. So,
Wow.
and that's, I mean, our peaks were probably only about 100 cases a day. We got 90. I think we've quite hit 100 deaths yet, but that it's really dropped off. And so, of course, just like in America, where a lot of people have had to, cafes are shut, restaurants are shut, a lot of entertainment industries completely moved to online. They're easing a few things, but just being really mindful because some of the countries around the world that have experienced a recovery and then have relaxed some of the restrictions, have had a second wave. I've heard stories like in South Korea where there's on the nightclub scene they've all got these clusters of new outbreaks, and so yeah, it's everyone's very cautious, but somewhat relieved. Kids are going back to school, I think, in 3 weeks' time, which is a relief for the kids and the parents. This homeschooling's been, interesting, but I wouldn't say it's. We certainly haven't kept up with the curriculum. What have we done? We've built a fish pond and a tree house and fixed a bathroom, and my kids are learning. I got video footage of them using power tools and things like that. So, life ed.
Life ed. Cool.
Yeah.
And so I feel like because we talked about how many different filters you can see the world through, I feel like I want to break down this question into your different filters. So maybe as a scientist and oceanographer, what's your internal process of what's processing the outside world? And maybe as a musician or maybe as a father, like how are you processing what's going
Yeah,
on
yeah.
outside?
Like I guess as a scientist, a little bit like when 911 happened, and there was all of the sort of aftermath of the Twin Towers collapsing and planes being grounded, and then there was a bunch of scientists in America who thought, "Wow, it's like all these contrails aren't up in the sky. Does that make a difference?" And they went into this study, and while the planes were all grounded, found there was quite a different kind of climatic condition right across America during that period. And so kind of got a little bit inspired by that as a scientist, and thought, well, okay, it's terrible what's going on. People, unable to work and things like that. But environmentally, I live on a creek. It's not the best creek in town. It's actually probably the worst creek in town. Some call it a drain rather than a creek, but it is a creek. And so we were just thinking, well, okay, if industries are shut down, will we see improvement in the environmental conditions in that creek? And so I got my son involved because he was kicking around the house, and I went and grabbed some equipment from my organisation, Environment Protection Authority, and we started monitoring the creek. And we sort of set up a bit of a study design, and we're having a look at that, and then also keeping an eye on what's actually happening both in the water and also in the atmosphere around the city. And there has been definitely documented improvement in air quality around the world, I think, because of COVID-19. You think of hardly any planes flying. There's a lot less, moving around on the roads. So with the water, it's not quite so obvious. But anyway, it really kind of inspired us to do that sort of thing. And also as a scientist, I guess we don't have that, there's only you get so much from talking online. But you really sort of fire each other up by talking face to face and having meetings and things like that. So it's given us opportunity to do a lot of housekeeping. So those projects, that pile of data that's been sitting around for a while that you've got to crunch through and start writing up, has given us all a little bit of scientific me time, I guess, and we just are able to start thinking about some questions around data or information that we've been collecting over the years that we never got around to doing. So that's sort of from a science perspective. With my music hat, I guess I kind of shared something to you at the beginning of this COVID shutdown period where we'd organised this massive. It was not only just going to be a party with bands playing for my partner's 50th birthday. It was actually going to be a rolling series of shows around different cities. And so that all just collapsed in a heap. And so, we just sort of thought amongst our musician friends, why don't we still do something kind of special? And so we decided to, the music project we were going to do, which was around writing music songs about Carla and her life coming to Australia and everything in between. And then we decided, well, let's have a bit of fun with it and try and look like her and get these red wigs. And then we got to do one practice before the shutdown, and then we were remotely doing all the music. And then we remotely made a video. And so someone stuck that all together, and we all just independently filmed ourselves in our red wigs doing things, and ended up being a video,
Yeah, I think that link to the video should be Facebook. It's up there. On YouTube, it's down there. It's really a charming, lovely gift for your partner's birthday. I mean, like, what an effort you made. It's adorable.
Well, it's more effort than I've put into my own bands. I mean, it's my other bands that I play and don't have a Bandcamp page. They don't have a recent video up or a separate Gmail account. You know, so it's kind of made me think, oh, I should be doing this all the time, right? So, but we're still going to play. I mean, we
Yeah.
actually will
Well,
play. And now that things are restrictions have been removed a little bit. We can actually get together and play some of the music, just as a practice. We can't play to anyone live, but at least as the Carla-Anns, which is the band, we'll play through the 6 songs we made up. We've 4 more songs, and we got a set list. Yeah. So
see, that's a very just very honestly very romantic and sweet tribute for Carlos, since you couldn't have done it in person. So that's a wonderful response to what's happening musically with the conditions. Do you feel a little more kind of microcosmically with you? Do you feel like, as a musician, do you feel like the way you're approaching your songwriting is different, or maybe the way you're playing guitar is different, or the way you're
oh
thinking as a
well,
musician?
since we did that music project, because it was so full on, not only writing the songs, which is kind of I put together 2 other musicians who are all good songwriters as well, and we all approached writing in a slightly different way. So it's kind of interesting. I'd never really worked with the other 2 together before, so that was part of the experiment. And then we just did. I guess I was saying to you before online that Ashtray Boy has always sort of been kind of this movement where we've been in different places and we've been sharing tracks. So the way we've been recording remotely is actually I'm quite practiced at it. And back in the 90s, we were posting tapes across the Pacific Ocean, and here we just push a button and send it to somebody. So way easier. So we've compiled all this music, and it was pretty intense to be able to get it put together, mixed, and then we created a little CD, and we burnt them out and printed them all off, and to have it all ready on the morning of the birthday, and then to have the video also put together and released in time sort of for the celebration. And look, after that, I don't know if I picked up my guitar for about 3 or 4 weeks because it was so kind of like intense. So the other thing we've been doing, which is sort of COVID related, but is potentially in a bit macabre way, but might have told you over the years since 2015 or 2016, when a whole lot of people, famous musicians died. David Bowie and Prince was the big ones that year. We created this thing that we do every December called the Dead Set, and it's basically chronicles all the what we pick as the 20 or so people who have passed and their music. And it doesn't have to necessarily be the main person. It might be a songwriter. It could be a few different things. So we've been doing this every year, and I'm happy to share with you. Actually, we made a beautiful booklet last year at the concert of all the different people that passed, a little bit about themselves, and then the lyrics, so people could sing along to the songs if they wanted to.
So you gave out these little church hymn books or something.
So just like you would get at a funeral, exactly, yeah.
Or at a funeral, right?
Yeah, and so we did it, and it's sort of being respectful. I mean, some people think we're a bit macabre about doing this, but I think that annoyed me. The reason why I got it started in 2016 was because, Prince and David Bowie passed away that year, and then all these other people did, and you never heard anything about them because there's all these tribute band after tribute band doing the Bowie songs or the Prince songs, and so it kind of annoyed me about these other people, and also because you've got to be a superhero in the pop world to get that kind of reaction. And there's all these great songwriters and sort of the unknowns that you never hear about. So we really, in that first year where there were all these other musicians that we covered, and there's some other fairly famous ones too, like Glenn Fry from the Eagles and a few others that didn't get a mention. So, I've never played an Eagles song, and I never probably will again, but I did that year. Take It Easy. And we usually pick a song that's, relates in some way. Malcolm Young from AC/DC, when he passed, we did Highway to Hell. There's just some obvious ones. George Michael was like Christmas, because he unfortunately passed away just before Christmas. Yeah. Anyway, so this year, Kraftwerk and Stranglers have just popped up fairly recently through COVID. Chris Prine, was unfortunately a COVID casualty.
John Prine.
John Prine, sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and I've clearly I didn't know him very well because I didn't even say his name right. But exploring, so we get to explore their music as well, and so it's kind of
that's an interesting. Also,
so it's
Winston
been
and Brandon
pulling together
Marcel's
this.
father.
Oh, okay. So we've been pulling in terms of the glue that keeps the music community together, our music community together. This has been one of those aspects. So we all keep in touch and explore these different musicians. And I think from what we did last year with the booklet, we really wanted to know more about the person. So like the fellow from the Stranglers who passed, which I can't think of his name right now, but the keyboardist, amazing keyboardist. And when you listen to some of his songs, there's this punk band that's playing with this ridiculously complex keyboard going over the top, which he was pretty unique back in the day and still is today. And then comes up with some really classic songs like Golden Brown, which are just these really beautiful kind of waltzy sort of tunes that is coming out of this sort of heavy punk band from the 70s. But some really odd stuff. And then going through Kraftwerk and then all the early stuff. I mean, Kraftwerk started in 1970.
Kraftwerk was like so important. Kraftwerk was one of those, right? 1970. It was 50 years
ago.
Well,
the organisation in the late 60s, and then they become Kraftwerk in the early 70s. Yeah.
I mean, just if you listen to it, even the quality of the recording, all that's great. But I want to bring it back to you.
Yes.
So, but that's all great. Thank you. So I feel like, so you talked about like what you're doing, what action you're taking as a musician, and how, since you worked so hard on Carla's 50th birthday deal, you didn't do that. So I'm wondering, as a scientist, do you like shifting your inside brain and thinking about how you tick as a scientist? Do you have an opinion about the COVID-19 virus now from your oceanographer scientist experience?
Yeah, I must say, I mean, I've been also like looking at all the different sites that put up the data and how they put the data on. I haven't been that happy with how it's presented, so I've been creating my own. So I've actually been keeping a data vigil on what's happening at a very local level, at a state level, and at a nationwide level, and then just keeping an eye on what's happening at an international level, and looking at just how it helps me understand how we're tracking. Like at the moment, actually, Victoria, the state I live in, for people in America, there's not many states in Australia, so it's not too hard to remember if I do tell you them. But we're one of the 7, and at the moment, Victoria is actually, I think, 50% of the country's new cases. So we're actually, we're only one of 7, but we're 50%, right? So disproportionately higher than normal. So even though we've been doing kind of well, we've been getting these new blooms, these new clusters that are coming in. There's a Meatworks that had a whole bunch of people that got it, and then one person was sort of a partner with someone who worked at an aged care facility, and then unfortunately they got into aged care facilities, just these little clusters, and seeing how they sort of evolve and then get contained fairly quickly. It's just the nature of it all, and just knowing when things really are, making sense of the data and listening to statisticians and health professionals, and they really say that we shouldn't be starting to feel comfortable until we've got down to like 2 or less cases per day, new cases in our area in our state. And that's, I mean, some of the states have already got there. So Queensland, there are many states that have had 0 new cases every day for up to a week.
Wow.
So they're not going, but you don't go from like, okay, it's all over, let's go and party hard, because something could just crop up.
Yeah, like they did in Seoul.
Yeah, and so of course not everybody's been tested. So I mean, if everyone was tested, and then you'd know, but we don't know. We know X% of the population has been tested, like a pretty small percentage has actually been tested. So,
can I ask you another external question about Australia? I know this is mostly about you, but I'm curious because you probably heard in the States there's a lot of Latinx and African American populations disproportionately that are suffering from COVID. Are you finding that same with the Aboriginal population there?
Well, so the concern, I mean, a lot of the Indigenous population there is certainly an urban Indigenous population, but a lot of the population do live more remotely and in Northern Territory in Western Australia. And so very early on in the piece, there was this concern about their vulnerability in terms of their health, because of all the pre-existing conditions, people are being more disproportionately affected by COVID-19. So borders were shut down really quickly. So state borders were shut down. and Northern Territory in particular really isolated well early on. I don't think they got more than about 20 cases or 30 cases all up, and so, but all the Indigenous communities were all closed very early on, and from what I've heard, that's been pretty successful. So at that level, it's worked. In terms of, I guess, demographics within a city, in fact, the numbers, certainly early on in my city, most of the cases were from people. It almost became an affluent disease. And when you looked at the numbers, most of the suburbs were the affluent suburbs where people have been on cruise ships, traveling overseas. People could afford to move around a lot. We're getting disproportionately higher in the cases. So that's because everything was coming into the country, and still a majority of all the cases from COVID-19 have been from external, from overseas. I think it's about 20% that are probably community transmission at this stage. So I don't think, if it is going to manifest like that, I don't think it has yet, because things have been contained and sort of shut down early enough.
Interesting. That's so opposite of what's going on here. Well, you guys are able to kind of lock down geographically more than we are in the States, because everyone wants their freedom here. We can't do that. But it's interesting how the affluent are actually the higher percentage of people who are getting it. Where here, it's the complete opposite. It's the poor and the people of color.
Well, I guess, without sort of saying the obvious, I guess public health can make a big difference. And so people are able to have full access to public health from day one. So, people have been able to go to the doctors and get the flu shots as well, because we're going into, unlike in America, we're going into winter. So our population is potentially becoming more vulnerable to COVID-19. And so people, I think all the flu shots have all gone, and I missed out the first 2 rounds, but we were on the list for the next lot to come through. So even if if you did get the flu, then that makes you more vulnerable for COVID-19. So that's the thinking, is to make sure everyone's sort of up to date with their flu shots as well.
New world. So, well, we're about at time. Is there anything else personal that you feel like you want to share from the inside to the outside?
I guess I think we were talking about having, what sort of hope there is. I guess it's, really keeping those strong links with your friends and seeing how they're all doing and checking in with each other, your work colleagues, your friends, your family. I think everyone's has been doing that, because you kind of go crazy just being stuck in your house all the time. Try and enjoy the outdoors as much as you can. I guess it's made a big difference for us. We've sort of snuck out to a few parks and done some nice bushwalks. And the thing you'll notice, if there's not many people getting out into the parks, is that the wildlife have moved back in, and it's actually a really special time. In Australia, as you probably know, we had a big bushfire season, and so a lot of the animals were, very heavily affected. So I've been going up to some remote park areas and just seeing these birds called lyrebirds, which are they're kind of like an Australian peacock, I guess. They're just this very flamboyant bird that mimics all these other sounds around them, and they've been everywhere in picnic grounds. They're very shy. We would turn up, and they're just all over the picnic grounds, just going nuts. So wombats, roaming all over. Animals that you don't normally see, we've been seeing. So, get out there and find the coyotes and bears wandering through your neighborhood or whatever it might be. That's in your neighborhood.
Oh, that sounds nice.
Don't scare them away.
We'll keep them in. Yeah, thanks it's nice to hear. It's a nice way to wrap up now, thinking about wildlife coming back, because it was so devastated there. So I'm glad that everyone, sounds like Australia's got it down pretty, the system's pretty set there where it's not so rampant, so good.
Yeah, it's listening to, maybe Australians listen to the government more, I don't know, but everyone's been pretty good about, no one's turned up to Parliament with guns saying we want to, open up the economy again or something.
We'll carry that towards them.
Yeah, certainly the way the New York mayor has spoken around how can you put a value on life? It's priceless, and I guess that's been a given over here. Whereas it seems like it's the vocal few that are saying that, whereas a lot of people seem to be saying the economy is more important. And So,
well, anyway, we're going to wrap up. So,
okay.
Thank you so much, Randall. Thanks for the chat. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. Make sure to like my Facebook page and follow my YouTube channel. I've got interviews booked through June, so make sure to tune in. Bye-bye. See you,
now.
Randall.
Yeah.
Okay.